Welcome back, Perfect Peeps, to Perfect.dev. Today we are talking all about making state management domain agnostic with DRxJS. I'm hoping I got that right because we have Zack DeRose on the show today.
Hey y'all.
Nice. Hey.
Was
Alex,
that
Brittany,
close,
thanks so
or
much for
is there
having me.
some
This is
fancier
cool.
name for the DRxJS?
Yeah.
Awesome.
So there's an interesting story behind that. It was actually at NGConf. Max, actually a friend of mine, made a joke about renaming myself to DRxJS. My last name's DeRose, so that's kind of where that planted the seed. But like the name DRxJS and the idea of using RxJS without using it, like DRxJS, that's kind of the theme of the library I'm trying to set up. So it works well.
That's pretty clever. Speaking of the library, I'll show off some things as we go along. It's an interesting pattern that Zack has put together, so we're going to be breaking it all down. And I think there's more to it than just the library. It's almost like a concept too. But before we get into all of that craziness, I kind of just want to let our listeners and our viewers know a little bit more about you, Zack. So can you tell us a little bit about your background and kind of some fun personal things too?
Sure. Yeah. I'm a senior engineer and engineering manager at Nrwl. So we build NX, if you're familiar with that. Extremely long on NX as well as RxJS, but we'll get to that later. I'm a father of 6, grandfather of 2, so
What?
big family man. Maybe older than I look.
He's
Yeah, you
always,
don't look that old.
he's always very proud of it. That's why I said some personal things, because I feel like every photo I've seen of you, and I've tried to find like an individual photo of you, it's always with a family member.
Thanks. Well, that like at the core of who I am, like that's it. Is my family. So yeah, I'm glad that comes through in terms of my like whatever my web footprint.
I feel like between you and Frosty, like all of the West Coast is covered. I don't know.
Yeah. Between the two of us, we got a lot of kids.
Yeah, exactly. Both working on Angular stuff often.
Both working on Angular stuff. We're both kind of interested in real estate. Me and my brother actually have a real estate business that we're running at the moment too, and Frosty does some of that too. So we talk about it actually.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess as far as the Nrwl piece or the NX piece, you have a special guest that you seem to keep on your wall behind you there. Any introduction to this person?
Yes, this is Jeff Cross, CEO of Nrwl. He watches over me. we're in the Nrwl Phoenix office right now. So
Nice.
Jeff will probably be coming in a little bit. It's still early here. So
Yeah, it's super early out there. Cool. Well, that's great. I guess that's awesome review of kind of how it got you to this point. But like, what is this DRxJS thing? Can you break it down a little bit for us?
Sure. And I want to make sure we're conversational on this too. So
Yeah.
interrupt me if something doesn't make sense, because this is anytime you talk about RxJS, it gets kind of hard without trying to nail it down to some discrete details. But in general, I'm extremely long on RxJS. In particular, like just how domain agnostic it is. So like, you asked me about my primary motivation for creating the package. I think a lot of it actually comes from some of the work we do at Nrwl is helping people migrate their code from like a legacy JavaScript system to a more modern one. Usually it's AngularJS to Angular, and just seeing from that how much of that code, like there's some waste involved in that, right? Like these are often like really large undertakings, and the industry has gotten better at figuring out how to do it and how to do it well. I've kind of figured out how to do it well, but still there's still a lot of waste even if you can do it really efficiently. So like in my old podcast, we talk a lot about trying to identify the carousels of tech and trying to jump a rotation. And this is kind of a goal at trying to accomplish that, seeing, hey, there is Like this cycle where we went from AngularJS to Angular, that's probably going to happen again. Like at some point, this stuff's going to go stale. Maybe React will go stale sometime in the future. React seems pretty strong actually, but like a lot of these frameworks are like rising and falling as we go. And I've only been in this industry for like 6 years, and I've seen kind of like that rotation happen.
Yeah, I
already
mean,
in
we've all lived
6
through
years.
like jQuery, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it was the framework, if you will, and now it's all changed.
Yeah, yeah, and depending on how your code bases are set up, like there's potentially very little you can actually bring over to framework 2.0. So in many ways, like what we're trying to accomplish, we say domain agnostic, but really what we're trying to accomplish is write some code that goes down to maybe more the core of like the actual thing, right?
Sure.
So like in my article, we look at like the tic-tac-toe example, and I use this one because I think Ken C. Dodds kind of goes through this in his Epic React course, like the tic-tac-toe thing. I think he uses the example teaching React hooks, which I'm actually I'm also a GDE and Angular, but I'm actually like really fond of React, just kind of ancillarily, just because it's very domain agnostic in a lot of things, like in its templating, in the way it kind of sets up the logic. The only thing I think it's like not particularly domain agnostic in is state management. So we have the DRxJS package for React. The goal of that is kind of to take a very domain agnostic library in React, but backfill in the piece I think is maybe not as domain agnostic in the state management. So at the core of DRxJS is like this idea of the view model. Like this is like this adapter separating out your code base between state management on the one side and like your view concerns on the other. And we have the three packages. One is the view model, and that's the view model package is actually simply a TypeScript interface. That's all it is, and all it is your view model is some function that returns an observable. Like it's not that complicated, hopefully. But
Is the TypeScript side of that like an important piece? Can you run that without TypeScript for those non-TypeScript lovers?
sure.
I
Well, I
love
mean,
TypeScript, but
yeah. Well, so the view model package itself is simply an interface. So when you transpile it, it goes to nothing. So
sure.
you could
Oh,
use
no.
it if you're not using TypeScript, I guess.
Nice.
It's not going to do much for you.
Nice. And
Yeah.
I think kind of some of what you're talking about right now, and Brittany like loves this concept too, like getting back to the core of just JavaScript in a way, right? I mean,
Exactly.
we're kind of pulling out of frameworks more and more. Svelte's trying to attempt to kind of get back to, just JavaScript at the end of the day. Is that where this package is kind of leading as well?
Oh yes,
Okay.
yes. And it's not me. Like to be clear, this is RxJS that I think is that vehicle. My package is just simply like setting up a framework on top of that to maybe help you as you're writing, maybe as more as a practical means. Like let's take this really powerful tool, really domain agnostic tool. Let's put some simple practical utilities on top of it, and let's go from there. So
Can we take a step back
go ahead.
too and like say what is RxJS? So I know it's about
Yeah.
observables, but what is RxJS?
Sure. So RxJS is, I want to do it justice. RxJS is a package for writing reactive code. And it's, the way I like to think of reactive code is timelines. So when you think of an observable, you actually think of observable events over time. So if you go back to like a history book when we were back in school and you see like history of the Revolutionary War, you see these discrete events on a timeline with like a date
And you're
attached.
observing them.
Exactly. So as you're going through, you kind of like observe these events, but we're actually taking a step up from that. Like we're a dimension above that, looking down and seeing that all in one flattened like object. Like the that's what the timeline is for
Okay.
us. So when we use RxJS, it's allowing us to think of our applications, kind of taking a step up from that, being the student looking down at the page, seeing the whole Revolutionary War, but very discreetly and like precisely laid out in terms of how these events happened, and that gives you a bigger picture of how to do that. And then so that's maybe the observable. The observable is the timeline. What RxJS actually gives you, and RxJS has an implementation of the observable pattern, but the observable pattern is not exclusive to RxJS. It's just like one implementation of that. But the thing that RxJS does really well is taking that timeline and giving you a really good tool set of composing other timelines from other timelines.
Yeah.
So that's if we're I always think about these things in terms of dimensions, but this like the way those things unfold is like super powerful. So yeah, if you're looking at my article there, I gave my timelines talk at RxJS Live in 2021, so I'm pretty fond of that one. But we talk about like here's a timeline of mouse clicks, and we go from that, and we actually use operators, so taking timelines and turning them into different timelines, to turn that into something meaningful, like a click counter, and going from that to, well, how many clicks have happened in the last 5 seconds, and we can keep going off of that. And it's extremely, one of the reasons I'm so long on this, particularly in front end, is if you think about the front end environment, it's kind of like this ocean of unexpected events happening at unexpected times. Like back end, maybe at least the back end I've worked on, a lot of it is request handlers. Like it's this very expectable, some sequence of events that's going to happen. That's not the case when you're in front end, where user could go this way or that way, or the user is maybe a timeline in itself. But yeah, being able to take that and compose something meaningful out of it elegantly is where, like, that's the power of RxJS. And there are some cons with RxJS. I don't know if y'all are familiar with them, but yeah.
I think
I'd
the
be
biggest
interested in
con
your
is trying to
experience.
tell like new people into Angular like the most difficult part is going to be to learn RxJS. So I love RxJS after you understand it. Like I use it all the time
Yeah.
in everything, but it's kind of a lot to take in when you go from like a promise-based like JavaScript code to something new like this.
Oh, 100%, 100%. It's definitely a different paradigm, but I think once you get it, there's like this huge payoff. But there is a huge buy-in cost. So
Yeah.
I know, like I went down an interesting path learning RxJS. I found the behavior subject, and I was like,
Yeah.
oh yes, like I could do this. So behavior subject is like it's an observable itself, but you can also call .value on it to like get value. And I was like, oh, that's cool. I can do this everywhere. And so I was actually like subscribing to behavior subjects, and inside the subscription calling next on other behavior subjects. And I was kind of like backfilling operators at the time, but it worked up until a certain point where I got into this really bad case with forms. And of course forms are in there too. But that was really tough. And I was like, this is powerful, but it's so dangerous. It's so dangerous to do it wrong, because you get like lost in this conspiracy theory web of what's going on.
I feel like RxJS, the two biggest things I've always heard, subscriptions, leaky subscriptions is always kind of the biggest one. People forget to unsubscribe or whatever on that side of it. And then the second one is always, once you kind of head down this paradigm, like every piece of your code has to be coming, and I don't think that's necessarily true either. So it's kind of a challenge once you're in that mode of thinking. But So yeah, to kind of steer it back to like the DRxJS, I'm gonna bring up the view model pattern. And again, we're kind of outlining this talk off of two wonderful things that Zack put out on Dev2. So we've got links to those too if you just want to read through it as well. But I'll bring that back up. So let's talk about this for a minute. Like, what is the view model pattern as we break this down?
Yeah, so like we said, the view model pattern, the idea behind it is like a function that returns an observable. So if we're looking at this, this is sort of a black box is kind of the idea. So we have some inputs we pass in. So those are parameters to our function, and we're going to use that to parameterize, how the output is supposed to look. So oftentimes these inputs will actually be observables themselves, but they could also be functions. They could also be just data. Different ways of further parameterizing, how your end observable looks. But at the goal at the end of it is to have that single observable coming out, so that as that one timeline. So think of that output circle on the screen as the single timeline. The only thing we have to worry about by the time we get that output is creating HTML based off the events we observe on the timeline.
So in like the most basic example, if I needed to do like 3 different fetch calls of 3 different data sets to make my HTML page, that's kind of that output is all one thing coming out?
Exactly. So your fetches could be 3 promises actually to the function, and you could have a single observable coming back. So you'd say, and we could kind of like we could go into details about how we should handle those 3 separate fetch accounts, or those 3 separate fetches. Like, I imagine we probably want to run them in parallel, but they're not going to come back all at the same time.
Right.
So that output observable would probably be, at the start we just have, full loading screen. But then as we get those responses back, and we're not sure which order it would be, we could represent those. Each has different states. Each has a different object being emitted from our observable. And so if you think about it, this is a great way of thinking about that crux between the logic and the view. So when we're writing the view, when we're writing our HTML, and it doesn't have to be HTML. that's one of the interesting things about it too. But assuming we're in webland and we're writing HTML, we can separate this out so that we can think only about, let me render HTML based on the most recent event I observed, and that's what we're going for. Is very simple. Let's write HTML based on that output, and then on the other side of that is figuring out all those concerns. But those should be a black box to our HTML. There's no connection between that and the actual fetches. So in one step, we write the state management to say, here's how that observable should be created. On the other side, we consume the observable and say, here's the HTML that should be rendered based on the most recent observed event. So.
Does this allow for, I'm lacking the word right now, but like breaking up of a monolithic like page so it has like different component types? So I'm thinking in React, like if you have 7 components on a page, are you going to have this kind of model view pattern come in and have where this HTML diamond down here is then those 7 different components, or would you have this in each of those?
Yes. So part 3 of this article series is going to be recursing on this pattern.
Okay.
So a lot of this right now is, if we look at our part 2, a lot of that is the second step of that. But part 1 is all creating the state management, and that's actually like kind of involved, and there's interesting stuff we can do on that side as well. But part 2 is like, let's just take that observable now that we have it, and let's make our tic-tac-toe game in vanilla JS. Let's make it in Angular. Let's make it in React, and it's quite simple. Hopefully, yeah. So there we go. So there's our tic-tac-toe view model. So we see we have the 3 inputs. 2 of them are observables themselves. 2 of them are user clicking on one of the squares in our tic-tac-toe box, and the other one is a user clicking the reset button. So those could actually be a 1 observable if you wanted, but we'd break it out to 2 because I don't know, it's nice to show that
Because
example.
more observables are better. Everyone knows that.
Exactly. But then, so we further parameterize this with an AI function as a parameter to this specific tic-tac-toe view model as well. So the AI function is given a state of our board, so like a tic-tac-toe board, like a 3x3 matrix essentially, and then the AI also needs to know like which of the letters it is. Is it X or O? We will then that function just says, okay, this is what the AI will do. So the image you're showing on screen here, this is actually a deterministic function of that. It just says, and we use this for testing. We say, for testing purposes, we're going to pass in an AI that always, like, it just kind of scans left to right and then down and picks the first ever space. And that way we can test it because it's reliable. Like we can run this in our testing to run our timeline tests. But when we actually do the actual implementation, instead of just like doing a deterministic AI will always go here, we instead like pass in a randomizer. So it'll look at, well, what spaces are available. Let's pick a random one off of that based on RNG. So.
Nice.
That itself is really powerful, like using functions to parameterize behavior or to parameterize functionality like that. And one of the reasons I wanted to call that out specifically in the article and here as well is like that ability to parameterize functionality is like that's super powerful in terms of like you can do polymorphism with that essentially, you know. But
Yeah.
if you think about like the observables as our input, like those, like that's we're passing in a timeline there, and that can be like any kind of future we could pass in, and it's like an object to think about that entire future. And so we're giving our function, our view model function here, the ability to completely parameterize its behavior based off any possible future. So again, that's not DeRxJS. That's all RxJS, but it speaks to why I'm so long on this. So,
Yeah, for sure. I can definitely see like the passion coming out of you for the RxJS side of this, so it totally makes sense.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to switch over to your part 2 though, so it kind of clicks in maybe a little further for people.
Sure.
So let me bring that up as well. I think immediately, like, you start thinking RxJS, so it must be Angular, and kind of your first example is that it's an Angular one, but I think
I think the first one's React actually.
Oh yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
The first one's React, and then the next one's Angular, but the one I wanted to get to is this one because I feel like the vanilla JS, all of a sudden it's like, oh, like we're not even in a framework anymore.
Absolutely.
And you're kind of using the same methodology, and I'm just gonna, I don't know
if you want to just like
this.
Yeah,
there we go.
We don't need to watch my article. We can go just to Stackblitz.
Yeah, so this Stackblitz is basically showing how this functions. So if I click a box, the AI kind of fires off after a couple seconds, and it starts doing exactly what Zack was talking about. So it's kind of cool to see this in practice in every single framework, essentially. And I guess, like, at this point, Brittany's probably going to have to write it in Svelte, I think, just to, prove another one.
Yeah, I'm super long on Svelte, Brittany, but I haven't been in it. So I'd be really interested to hear, like, its support for RxJS.
Yeah, I've never touched RxJS, so I would be something I would have to learn first, I would think.
I think RxJS is super fun to learn, and it's super powerful to know. I would say the one thing, and I'm kind of curious how it fits with the DeRxJS package as well. The one problem that I often hear with it is the debuggability, or like being able to pause throughout and return to a specific state. Do you have any thoughts around that for this package?
I do actually. So one of the issues with it is when you use RxJS, a lot of your I don't want to say legacy debugging, but like the standard debugging, like the way you usually like use the dev tools, like set breakpoints. that just kind of gets lost a little bit just in the implementation of RxJS, because essentially what happens is the call stack gets flooded by your operators, and each operator is essentially a function taking an observable and returning a new one, and so you're gonna have a bad time if you're trying to find a bug in your RxJS and you're trying to look at that. So and there's been some cool efforts to build some better development tools around that. Like I know in some backend other paradigms, there's really good debugging tools for like analyzing your streams, and the concept of observables isn't that far off from that. So I think there's definitely potential there. With my package, I actually want to take a different approach though. So rather than trying to give better debugging tools for when you have a bug, I want to change the conversation so we catch the bug before it happens. And I think the way to do this is via like this kind of timeline testing. So Alex, if you could maybe pull up the that image we were looking at from part 1, where we saw just the parameters and the observable coming out.
I'm scrolling through like crazy. You might have to...
Sorry, it's a long one. But yeah, we're getting into some of the timeline tests here. But if we go back up to like the very top of all this, where we just saw the how the pattern breaks down, maybe a little further up. There it is. There it is. Right. So the idea for this, so we're on the other half of the graph right now. We're looking at filling out the black box. Based on the observables coming in, and of course the function coming in as well, we can actually set up, like we were talking about, timelines as inputs to this function. So we can take any kind of input for our click events, and any kind of input, any kind of timeline for our reset events, and we can define, okay, based off the observables we got passed in, what should the behavior look like coming out? And typically you call this like marble diagrams, and they get a really bad rap. They're kind of hard syntax to look at and read and write. But at the core, I think is this really powerful idea that I think just needs a little bit better execution. So this is kind of getting into this. So on screen there, if we want to look at that, this is maybe like the first test case. So an input 0. If no users perform any events, we just have the output down at the bottom, where we have sort of an initial state, and it just kind of goes like nothing happens, right? But let's look at our next test case, and we can see like, so here is a test case of another very simple one, where we just have a user clicking a single time on the middle button. So we say based on this, based on these two inputs coming in, this is what the output should look like. So here's our output. We start with an initial state of nothing, or the starting state. Then as soon as the user clicks, we should immediately see like our state should represent, okay, there's something in the middle button. And then 2 seconds later, we should see the AI come in, and the AI is going to behave deterministically in our tests because we parameterized it to behave that way. So it'll always go to that top left. So based on that, here's a test that should tell us, whether our code's working properly or not. So and we continue this pattern in the article ad absurdum, maybe. Like we go through complete whole test cases where we go through the whole game of tic-tac-toe and make sure, like, if I win, it says I win. If the AI wins, it says they win, and kind of going through like that. But
I want to just bring up real quick, because sometimes the RX Marbles thing gets lost in people. So let me make this a little bigger. But so this is an example of what Zach's talking about. And if you're dealing with RxJS, like, this becomes kind of the thing you go back to. So this is an example of a function called combine lattice, and there's two different streams happening here. There's one with a 1 on it and another one with letters on it. And as you pass this one in, you can see at the bottom it's actually combining these two. So it goes from 1A, and then all of a sudden it becomes 1B as it combines the second and the third. And this is kind of the way to think about RxJS and some of its functions, and you can go through a ton of these. And it at first I was like, this is total BS, for lack of a better word. Like, this doesn't make any sense. And then once you start to use it, you start to realize, okay, I see what they're trying to actually present here. So that's a lot of what Zach's kind of going through as well.
Yeah, and that's that interactivity you had there, where as you changed the timeline,
Yeah.
you were going back, Alex, and rewriting time.
I know, it was wild. Back to the Future stuff.
Exactly. But then, yeah, and seeing that update in real time, like, that's really cool, just to see, okay, this is like, that's what we're defining. We're defining in terms of our state management how things should work. So going back to the issue of debugging and finding out errors in your code, by detaching sort of this logic from our view, the goal is saying, let's test our logic. We can run that logic separate from our view entirely. And a convenient way to do that, for automating, to make sure going forward, things still work. Unit tests make a really good use case for that in sort of these marble tests. And I've got a hot take on this too. And this may be a hot take for people in the RxJS community, but if you don't need marble diagrams, you may not need RxJS. So
that is a hot take. I like it.
Yeah.
The funny thing is, or I don't know, the irony of it is, once you start down RxJS, my mind never shuts off from it, and that's the hard part. Like, I've even gone and written like Firebase things that should just be dynamically pulling data, and I'm like, well, I'm going to bring that in an observable because the rest of my pattern is observable. And it gets somewhat out of hand at a certain point. Like, if your mind only starts to work that way, though, like, maybe when you're in your Node.js package and you just need one API call to do one thing, you don't necessarily need that. Like, it's okay. So there's definitely like points that you really need to think about how you're executing with it.
Oh yeah.
What would you tell people though, as far as the package that you're writing? How would you explain what it adds to RxJS? Like, we've talked a lot about RxJS, but the pattern itself, and when you go to implement it, and I think this might be the kind of second part of your series here.
Yeah.
When you go to implement that in like a standard JavaScript way, what's that adding on top of our RxJS? I don't know if I've put that together in my head yet.
Yeah. So what my package is adding is separation, so you don't have to think about RxJS when you're writing your view, right? Like, that's the goal with React. Angular kind of has this more built in, just with the abilities it has. It's my impression that Svelte has like similar capabilities built into its framework for RxJS as well. So
I know, I mean, it has the reactivity pieces kind of built in. I don't know about with state management. We have stores in Svelte. And I mean, technically, because it's just JavaScript that you're writing, if RxJS is JavaScript, you could pull in to Svelte by using just the JavaScript. So there's not like React makes you use kind of React-y stuff to do certain things, and Svelte doesn't have that.
Yeah, but so that's a good segue to what we're trying to do with React. It's rather hard to do this in React out of the box. So the goal with DeRxJS React package is to say, here's your the observable that came out, like the observable we're parsing. And so what the package is essentially just a higher order component where you pass in a presentational component, and that's essentially the React you write. It's just the presentational component, and it's just wiring up that observable. So you can fire so the presentational component simply parses in the events taken from the observable, and you go from there. Yeah, so there's the app if you're watching on YouTube. So the code you're looking at there, that's actually the view model code. So ideally, you'd be importing this from some implementation of the RxJS code on the backend side. But if you look at the tic-tac-toe.tsx file, that's where kind of this stuff comes into play. So you'll see we import the DeRxJS component. That's our higher order component. And we pass in some parameters to this. We say, here's the view model. And that's just imported from that other file we were looking at. And then we say, here's the component. And the component's actually down below there. If you want to scroll down to the presentational component.
Gotcha.
And StackBlitz doesn't like some of the stuff. I couldn't figure out
Well, he doesn't
how to
like
get
the
to like
fragment.
fragments. Yeah.
Yep.
I don't know what that is, but there you go. It works on the right hand side.
Fragment factory.
I don't know why
Practice
they
factor.
do that. It's like, come on.
Yeah. I don't know how to like get to the TS config on this. Like that's
I've asked that before. I never got a straight answer.
I think they're trending in a really cool direction with this though, with their web containers. Like
Totally. We just did a pod on it. Check it out, folks. It's really cool.
and check out some of the stuff with NX with that, because that stuff really sings.
Yep.
I'm really excited on that. But coming back to this, coming back to DeRxJS, if you look at this, like if you look at just this function, the tic-tac-toe view function, this is the presentational component. There's nothing RxJS about this. There's nothing about RxJS, I would argue, about this whole file aside from the things you import from externally. So the idea is you write this as you would, and there's actually like I think we use like the use ref hook maybe, because we need like a ref to maybe the buttons. But aside from that, we're not using hooks for state management, and that we're simply delegating that over to our logic side of things. And so the package is doing some RxJS stuff in the back end, but all you're doing, well, hopefully all you're doing, I probably need to iron out some of these things more, but yeah, so look out for version 2.0. But once you get this package, after passing in your observable, you should be in React land completely. Not thinking about RxJS at all, just thinking about how do I write my template for this interface, right? This object that I know what the parameters of it are using TypeScript. So based off that, here's a function that returns HTML, and that's what I want. I think like if I can get this package right, I may be moving over to React. Right now, I'm in Angular because like that's a horse I know how to ride. Yeah. But I'm putting Angular into a point where I'm using Angular very minimally. Like I'm using RxJS for almost everything, and this package is taking that and like bringing it to more people,
What
so
does
more
that
people can
do
enjoy it.
for the build step? Like, do you have to build it, or do you run it off of a server and you have to call the server, or how do you get that data once you're in an actual website?
Yeah, so once you're in an actual website, this all compiles down to JavaScript.
Okay.
So you're sending over just static files to the web server, and that's sending it out to everyone's
Perfect.
clients.
So, are you shipping React then?
Only in the React example of this.
Only in the React ones,
Yeah.
because you have to ship React to run the React code in the virtual DOM.
Right.
So
right.
like the other packages that are delivered, there's one that's just JavaScript, but then the DRxJS/React would ship the React portion.
Right, exactly. And so on the other side of things, we kind of talked about the split. There's the view side, which is writing template based off events emitted by observables. On the other side is building that observable from your inputs. And on that side, I'm trying. We have the DRxJS reducer package, which is trying to do very much the same thing. So we're trying to provide an example or a package or a framework where you get all the benefits out of RxJS. You get the timelines. Like that's the big thing. You get the timelines, man. But you don't have to write any RxJS code. Like what you need to write is a reducer function that says, here's my events, and here's transitioning from discretely one state to the next. This is how you get from one to the other.
And those are probably similar to Redux and other
Yes.
state management.
Yeah, I mean that's if you're familiar with Redux, the reducer model should seem like extremely familiar. It's writing the reducer function. And the reducer function is simply previous state, action, new state, and that's it. Like, so yeah, if you can provide that function, the package can give you the timeline, and so what that does is, when we're thinking about these things, we think about that timeline, going back to the history book example, taking in that whole thing. Like when we put on our architect hats, that's what we should be thinking about, is this big picture. But when we're implementing, that's too much to have in an engineer's mind. You don't want to be thinking about that. You want to be thinking about, you want to be zoning in on the one event. Mm-hmm. And that's what the reducer package is trying to do. We're taking that dimension and exposing it. So as we look down on it as an architect, we can see, okay, this is how things should behave. We can actually test on that level too. But we can also go down to a more discrete level at the engineer level and say, okay, I don't need to worry about the timeline. Let me just think about, how do I get from one state to the next? And that's all the code you should be writing. And that's very testable too. Like a reducer function is by definition a pure function. So
that's awesome.
That's great. Well, I think that is a great summary of everything that you have going on. Excuse me. I think there's so much more to dive into that we can't do justice to on video or audio. So definitely go check out Zack's 2 articles on Dev2. Sounds like there's probably going to be a 3rd one coming out soon, but yeah. Check out all these packages. I think it's really neat framework, if I will. I'll put the framework title on there that you have going on there.
That may be too much. That may be giving me too much credit.
I think it's great. No, it's a good library at least.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
So at this time, we are going to jump into our Purrfect Picks. And like I said at the beginning, Zack is kind enough to have provided some. So Zack, why don't you kick off our first one here?
Yeah. So this is a audiobook I recently got. I'm a few chapters in, but it's called Peak Mind, written by a neuroscientist, I think at the University of Miami, who focuses on human attention. And beyond code, one of the things I'm very enthusiastic about is communication. And being able to leverage attention, train attention, and be able to master our biology, our ability as humans to communicate, but also I think it goes to other levels as well. I think I see it in my engineering as well. So very interesting read on learning how to take the tools you have as a human and refine them and make them better in terms of your mental capacity and your capacity with attention. So highly recommend.
I like that.
This
I sent Brittany Atomic Habits, which I think is very, very similar in thought. Kind of.
I was just going to say I might have to pick this up after I finish Atomic Habits.
Yeah.
Atomic Habits is another one of my favorite. It's it's really this book, Peak Mind, Atomic Habits, and I think Deep Work are my trilogy of books.
Nice.
We need to read.
That's awesome. Your next pick, I think Mr. Cross behind you probably, made you do this one.
No, this is completely voluntary. NX, so I work for Nrwl. NX is this really cool monorepo tool set that's more than just monorepos. It's a really great way for architecting your code base in general, is my opinion. So we just came out with NX 13. We actually came out with 13.1 the day after Next.js released its latest iteration. I think Angular's coming out with a new one too, and I imagine we'll be pretty soon after that with a 13.2 for Angular 13. And Victor actually just released our roadmap for NX 14. So if you're curious on everything NX will do from version 13 to 14, here's the roadmap. So.
That's a fantastic company name too. I love Nrwl. It's awesome.
Great logo too.
So interestingly, it came from a dream of Jeff's one time. So there's actually a version of AngularJS. So before, this was actually interesting to find out. They actually named a lot of their releases, an adjective and then a noun. And one of the releases was Prophetic Narwhal. for that was back when Jeff and Victor were on the Angular team. So that came from a dream that Jeff had, and then they made it a company. So
Fantastic.
There you go.
We might have to talk afterwards. We have our setup in Lerna, and I've always wanted to go back to NX setup, but I've only done it on Angular, so it'd be cool to check out the Next.js version.
Yeah, and then we have recent things too so you can do Lerna and NX in the same code base now.
Oh, yeah, we're definitely gonna talk then. Sweet.
There we go.
You have a third pick as well.
Yeah, this is shameless self-promotion. So this is my podcast channel. I had a really great conversation with two of my good friends, Hicham and Youssef, and we talked. We're trying to get like on a regular cadence, but we had some really good conversation on leadership and creating value as engineers and transitioning from engineer to like leadership positions. So
Awesome.
yeah. Shameless self-plug on that one.
No, good. That's perfect. Love
We
it.
accept those too. Mine is going to be one too. So
Nice.
just wait.
I think you might have kind of touched on my pick a little bit. Angular 13 just came out. Hoping to have someone on. I reached out to Frosty, by the way, to chat about 13 and all the funness. I noticed one major thing that I was really impressed with. I'm totally dropping the name right now. It's the language piece that came out. Why can't I find it? Yeah, this language service piece. I was really impressed with their new way of kind of injecting that in and making it super simple to go through different languages. So for sure, check out all of the different changes. I'm hoping we have a pod pretty soon on kind of breaking it down. There's a lot of cool stuff in there now. My second pick, obviously, is Frosty's breakdown of it. He did kind of a pre-breakdown. I don't know if that was because Angular was supposed to release and they released late or how that occurred, but this is Aaron, or Frosty as we all like to call him. His breakdown kind of pre-release, but it basically covers everything that's in there. So,
Nice.
Brittany, your pick?
And my pick is Svelte Sirens. I'm hoping that this podcast is going to drop after Svelte Summit has happened and the announcement is out there. We are a new Svelte society for women and non-binary. You can go to sveltesirens.dev and join the community. We have talks that are going to be available. We're going to do them in the Svelte Discord starting out. So if you go to the events tab, Alex, you can see I'm going to do the first one on November 22nd on building design systems in SvelteKit. And then the talks will be available later on the talks route on our website.
Cool.
There's
That's
nothing
awesome.
there now.
Talk about
We haven't
cool
had any
logos.
yet. I'm
That
still
logo
working
is
on the
awesome.
website. So,
I love it.
but hopefully by this point it will be all done.
Sweet. Yeah, that sounds fantastic. Well, I just want to say huge thanks again, Zach, for coming on. I think it's a really neat library. I often like RxJS kind of still amazes me and observables and the way they work. So huge props for kind of taking that on and pushing it forward.
I appreciate that. Again, all the props go to Ben Lesh and all the work they do at the real RxJS project.
Yeah, you blew my mind a little bit today. So
That's
impressive.
cool. Well, if I could really quick just plug some of the future things I want to do with the package too.
I think we can allow it. Okay.
Okay, thanks. Appreciate it. The pipeline dreams for this are, like we talked about the timeline testing, providing a really cool UI for generating those kind of tests. So the tests you can actually run in Jest or Karma or what have you, based off of UI and based off of really friendly one for creating your timelines for your inputs and your outputs and saying this is how things should look. So that's step one of DeRxJS taking over the world. Step two is taking all the data from generating these tests and understanding what the solutions to those are, so we can train AI to write all your state management code for you.
Oh,
And
that would
so
be a dream
we'll
come
all be
true.
out of jobs, or we'll just be writing the templates.
Wow.
That would be amazing.
We'll see how that works.
I would
But,
love to lose that job, by the way. So.
Yeah,
Cool. Well, thanks again for coming on. Really appreciate it. We'll talk
yeah.
soon.
Really appreciate y'all reaching out. Thanks so much.
Thank you.